Zombies blow up real good.
Greg brings an amazing dedication to it.
Greg is just about the best in the business.
The makeup is stunning.
The zombies are incredible. He's the best in the world.
Greg is such a nerd. I mean, in the best sense of the word, like nerd, somebody who loves, who's obsessed with this world. He loves this shit. It's his whole world. That's what he lives for, zombies.
George was his mentor. So even though his effects house is as big as you can get in LA, he dropped everything else to do this.
K&B and Nicotero and those guys went, wow.
My name is Greg Nicotero. I'm the special effects makeup designer for Land of the Dead. And we are here at K&B Effects, touring the studio. So this is a partially devoured zombie victim. We created a whole bunch of different variations of not only fake bodies, but then also prosthetics that are worn by actors to simulate chests being torn open and arms being devoured, and a lot of zombie action that occurs in the film.
3, 2, 1, kick.
Being a young film enthusiast growing up in Pittsburgh, I was a fan of George's movies.
I went to Rome to write the script for Dawn. My wife and I were out at a restaurant, and this young boy came over to me and said, "Are you George Romero?" In English, he says this, and I said, "Yeah." And he says, my name's Greg Nicotero, and I live in Pittsburgh, and my family." So I met Greg and his family in a restaurant in Rome.
It was full circle for my career to be able to start in 1984 on a George Romero zombie movie, and 20 years later get to the point where I've come full circle and I've been able to work on another film with George in a different capacity. It really meant a lot to me, and I know it meant a lot to George as well. This is a puppet head, and we have various skull pieces, and the idea is that this all gets closed up and all of these pieces get put back together like a big puzzle. And what we have inside is an air mortar that will fill this whole area with blood. So it'll all be closed up. We'll step back here, and then we'll load the air mortar. So you'll get 3, 2, 1, blam!
The way the zombies look in this picture is different from the look of zombies in the past. It's sort of an extension of George's zombie look. Still in the same family, but artistically, Greg has really grown.
The brow is great. That concerned, puzzled. Can't get it. Don't get it.
He makes the blood as real as possible, the guts and the teeth. I mean, he just goes nuts over it. It's funny, and I love watching him. And when you see the zombies, you see how specific his work is, how detailed.
This was one of the ones that we did where it's a radio-controlled eyes. Wow. So we can definitely get the dead look.
I like what they do with the eyes. It makes sense, you know, that they have white eyes.
Greg Nicotero and Chris Nelson and the crew that put together this and the zombie makeups have thought it through medically in a kind of a scary way as far as I can see.
Greg's dad was a surgeon and wanted Greg to go into medicine. And I think his dad's probably still shooting at me.
For a more advanced zombie, the eyes are much more glazed over. But then for some of the newer ones, we wanted them to look kind of painful. Yeah. So we went with the red outer rim, and then there's a little bit of blue. Anatomically and physiologically, if you're dealing with a rotting body and the muscle's breaking down and the flesh is breaking down, I wouldn't imagine that they would become more animated. I would imagine they would become less animated. It's harder to walk. They, you know, their muscles don't work like they used to. Their bones are more brittle. We did a whole bunch of good chunky bite marks with some flesh hanging out.
He's always looking to keep the standard up here. Is why do this at all unless we're going to do something new, number one, and something of a certain standard so that it's going to really get to the audience, you know, really kind of entertain them in a kind of a gruesome way.
We've built all the puppets with a reservoir in the back of the head so we can film with blood and This is a fake head of one of our human victims, and it's based on Al Lorenzana, who is a worker here at K&B, we had to make a one-to-one replica of him for a gag in the film where he gets his head torn off by zombies. So what we did was we did a life cast of him in the expression, sort of a pained expression, and ran it out of silicone. Scott Patton painted it, punched all the eyebrows, punched the eyelashes. Ron Pipes and Mark Boley did all the hair work on it to match Al. So the shot in the movie is that you're gonna see a pair of hands come up like this and start pulling and twisting, and then we're gonna cut to a back angle where he actually gets his head torn off.
It's a gore fest. You gotta have the feeding. It was really cool when that guy's neck got ripped off.
Part of the zombie mythology is that if the brain is still alive, the zombie is still alive. So there's one sequence at the opening of the film where action! Big Daddy grabs the top of one of the zombie's heads right as he's machine gunned across the neck. The body drops and the head is still alive. And Big Daddy turns it towards him, looks at it, and then goes to put it out of its misery, so he drops it and stomps on it.
We've got a really interesting gag where one of our stunt performers is a double amputee, and we did a gag where his legs get ripped off as a truck backs up, you know, with prosthetics and gore unit. And we see him on the ladder of the truck as it takes off over the bridge.
A zombie, a goth zombie, jumps at me. So we had this big fight. I punched the hell out of him, and then I take my CO2 and put a harpoon through his head. I love that shit.
There's a scene where Riley's lowering the bridge for Dead Reckoning to get back into downtown Pittsburgh, and the bridgekeeper zombie steps out and grabs him, and he's missing an arm and he's missing half of his face, and they struggle and wrestle, and then Riley dispatches him with chopping his head off.
The pre-zombie grabs the Manolete character, and his head comes and flips up over, and he bites the guy on the shoulder, and then his head comes back and he gets shot through the chest and then takes the hit, you know, through his head. That kind of gag, which you really just haven't seen in one of these movies before, that, you know, me as a fan of the genre, you go, okay, that's a great idea.
Don't go underneath the bone there, but yeah, go like you're pulling it, reaching into the muscle. Great. My favorite night in the entire shoot was the last night of principal photography, because we were shooting inserts for the Ammo Mag sequence, and George had always described it as his tableau. He said it's the scene of the original Dawn in the basement, where there's people chewing on limbs and we see bodies and the camera's sort of searching through and we're seeing all these horrific, hellish images. So the way that we laid the entire sequence out was we had 6 different vignettes, and the idea was that the flashlight comes in and shines across the vignettes, and as it does, we see one guy whose legs have been devoured and he's being eaten by 2 zombies, and we see another girl who's eating an arm, and then we see another 2 people that are eating someone, and then we see a guy stick his hand down a victim and pull his tongue out. That was the most fun I had the entire show, because I thought we were getting some really good, juicy bits that the fans would like. And me being a fan of George Romero movies, aside from being able to be a co-worker, those were the shots that I knew I would want to see in a zombie movie. So it was a lot of fun.
He really was there to, you know, really make it happen as best he could. And, you know, it's worth a lot.
Greg, a great artist, and he has an awesome team, wonderful team. Hardworking, diligent, thorough. You guys did a great job. Without you and George and the whole crew, that wouldn't be a movie.